Hello, I am Dr. Kulkarni. Today I will be speaking on descriptive types of epidemiological studies. The lesson objectives for today's lesson are that at the end of the lesson, the participants would be able to describe the steps in a descriptive study, describe common issues with the descriptive studies. There are two types of descriptive studies, the cross-sectional studies and the longitudinal studies. And this table shows the comparison of the two types of descriptive studies. The research question in cross-sectional as well as the longitudinal studies is of descriptive type. So there is no difference as far as the research question is concerned in the two types of studies. Similarly, there is only one group involved. There is only one group. No comparison group is there in both the types of the studies. So participants are from only one group of or there are only one group of individuals in the study. The difference comes in the measurement of the variable. In cross-sectional studies, during the entire period of study, the variable or the variables in the research question are measured only once. Whereas in the longitudinal study, the variables in the research question are measured more than once. The indication for the cross-sectional study is when you are interested in the prevalence or average of a variable. Whereas in longitudinal study, the indication could be incidence of the variable or the prevalence of the variable. So the time distribution of the variable is difficult to be described in cross-sectional study, but it can be very well described or in the longitudinal studies. So whenever the time element is there and you want to study the time distribution of a variable, the longitudinal study is the study of choice because it can be described very easily with the help of longitudinal studies, whereas it is very difficult in the cross-sectional studies. Because one has to visit more than once, in case of longitudinal study, the longitudinal studies are therefore costly as compared to the cross-sectional studies, which are comparatively cheap. This is the schematic presentation or a diagrammatic presentation of a typical cross-sectional study. Here we have the population, and from this we draw a sample. The sampling is not an essential step in a cross-sectional study. When the population size is small, it may be preferable to make the measurement or make the observations on the primary variable on the entire population. But if the population is large, then the cross-sectional study may require sampling. So we draw a sample, representative sample from the population, and this is the time element shown in the figure, and the observations are done at only one point of time in the cross-sectional study. So we make measurement of the variable or the variables in the research question only once during the entire study period. The longitudinal studies, on the contrary, are different. These are the two different possibilities in a typical longitudinal study. Like in cross-sectional study, we have got a population and we may be required to draw a sample if the population size is very large. So we draw one sample from the population and then we make the measurement of the variable once over here, second time over here, third time over here, and fourth time over here, and so on, depending on the study. So here, only once the sample is drawn from the population, and the observations are made on all individuals at periodic interval for the same variable in the research question. So only one sample drawn and the variable is measured 4 times over here or 5 times or 2 times depending on the study design. The second variant of the longitudinal study could be that the population is there, we draw the sample and make measurement of the variable in the research question over here. Then second time, we draw a second sample from the same population. The sample must be from the same population. It is possible that the individuals who were included in the sample for the first time or the first sample may be repeated in the sample drawn second time. But important thing is that the sampling method is similar first time, second time, third time, and the fourth time. So we draw these sample second time and make the required measurements second time. Similarly, we draw the sample third time from the same population and make measurements as required, and the fourth time, and so on and so forth. So here, the sample are drawn repeatedly and the measurements are done at the in the first sample, second sample, and the third sample on the same variable. But the samples are drawn from the same population and by similar method. Here, only one sample is drawn and the measurements are done on the individuals in the sample 4 times. So these are the two variants of the longitudinal study. Then these are the steps in a typical cross-sectional study. Typical cross-sectional study have got 8 steps: decision, or taking the decision of the study, defining the population, defining the problem, collecting the data, describing the problem, measuring the problem, hypothesis formation, and reporting. And we will discuss these one by one. The decision of the study that the cross-sectional study is to be undertaken depends on the research question, which has to be descriptive type. Some prior knowledge of the population is required for drawing the sample, and we may then undertake the hypothesis formulation. Hypothesis formation is not, or prior existence of hypothesis before starting the cross-sectional study is not an essential requirement in a typical cross-sectional study. So research question has to be descriptive type, and the time element or the time distribution of the variable is not there. So if the time distribution of the variable is required, then we cannot undertake the cross-sectional study. We have to take the longitudinal study. Then we have to define the population. So we have to define who will be the persons, or which units will be eligible to enter in the study. So the population or the participants. A good research question gives an indication as to who will be the participants, and it will give a good research question will indicate the population or participants for a study. The precision in this is introduced by inclusion and exclusion criteria. All these inclusion and exclusion criteria cannot be mentioned in the research question. Otherwise, the research question will become very long. So for the sake of brevity, there is only an indication given about the population, but the population precision or the population is precisely described by introducing the inclusion and exclusion criteria. The inclusion and exclusion criteria or defining the population helps in enlisting all populations. So we know who are the units, or which are the units, or who are the persons eligible to enter in the study from the population. So it helps in enlisting all the participants. It helps in sampling, and it also helps in comparing our study with other studies. Because by inclusion and exclusion criteria, we describe the profile of the participants in the study. If our study is to be compared with other studies, then naturally the profile of the participants of our study and the other study with which we are comparing our study, the profile of the participants should be similar. So by describing in detail the inclusion and exclusion criteria, we see that the comparisons can be made with other studies and other populations. These are the examples of the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So suppose the study is there wherein we want to study the caloric intake of the students of Maharashtra University of Health Sciences. So the research question is that what is the caloric intake, or how much is the caloric intake of the students of Maharashtra University of Health Sciences? So here the research question mentions that the study population is the students of Maharashtra University of Health Sciences. The details are not given in the research question, and these details must be explained by way of inclusion and exclusion criteria. So we can set up the inclusion criteria, something like this: the students enrolled in, say, 2017, 18, and 19, so that we do not include the students who are enrolled before 2017 or the students who are enrolled after 2019. Then we say that we will include only those students who are from the institutions affiliated to Maharashtra University of Health Sciences. So students from other institutions which are not affiliated to the institutions, not affiliated to Maharashtra University of Health Sciences will not be included. We may also say that we will be studying only on the allopathy branch or the students of allopathy in Maharashtra University of Health Sciences, so that the students belonging to Ayurvedic faculty or homeopathy faculty or Unani or nursing are excluded. So inclusion criteria also helps us in some way in excluding the students, some students. Then there is exclusion criteria. We may say that we are not going to do the study on postgraduates, so only undergraduates are included. We may say that we will be excluding PhD candidates. So postgraduate students and PhD candidates are excluded. We may also say that the students who are transferred out will be excluded. So the students who got initially admission in Maharashtra University of Health Sciences or allopathic branch, but subsequently were transferred to other universities, we say that those will be excluded and they will not therefore be included in the study. So this looks pretty comprehensive inclusion and exclusion criteria, which will help. So if a student comes or if the name of the students appears in the list of the Maharashtra University of Health Sciences, if we check against these criteria, we can give a decision whether this student will be included or whether this student will not be included in the study that we are going to undertake. So together, the inclusion and exclusion criteria will decide which participant is eligible to be included in the study. Then sampling and sample size are the two things which must be considered while undertaking the study. One must take advice of a good statistician for these two things, that is the sampling and the sample size. Which method of sampling will be adopted will depend on the type of the population, whether it is a finite or infinite population, whether it is homogeneous or heterogeneous population. Upon that will depend which type of sampling will be adopted. A finite population is one wherein the total number of the participants in the population, total number of the units in the population can be easily enumerated. In our case, it is a finite population because we can easily find out the number of the students who are eligible from all the universities from the allopathic branch and so on and so forth. So it is a finite population. For that, there are different sampling methods. If it is not possible, or if it is infinite population, there are different sampling methods. Homogeneous and heterogeneous populations are for a given variable. There may be wide variation in the variable. The previous experience may say that there is a wide variation. Then in that case, the population is heterogeneous, and there are different methods of sampling. And for relatively homogeneous population, for the variable under study, there are different methods. So one must take the advice of the good statistician for the sampling method. Then the second is the sample size. For sample size, we'll have to set out the alpha and beta error as to how much alpha and beta error is acceptable to us. What is alpha error? What is beta error? Is beyond the scope of this presentation, and one must take the advice of a good statistician. But we must define the acceptable level of alpha and beta error. The second thing that is to be decided is the precision of the estimate. How precise we want our estimate of the average caloric intake of the students of Maharashtra University of Health Sciences. That has to be decided and specified. That helps in calculating the sample size for our study. So advice of the statistician must be taken for this matter. Then comes the defining the problem. Defining the problem includes the defining the variable, defining the source of the information of each variable, defining the units of measurement and statistical scale of each variable. So we know that we have primary and secondary variables. Primary variables are those variables which are there in the research question. So these are the primary variables, and the secondary variables are those variables which are not included in the research question, but which are included as a part of the study. They are included in the material methods. So these must also be known and must be specified. Then the source of information for each variable must also be mentioned. This point we will discuss later on in the next slide. Then the units of measurement of each variable must be mentioned, like height, whether it will be measured in feet or centimeters, weight, whether it will be mentioned in kilograms, and to what accuracy, whether it will be measured to the accuracy of 0.1 kilogram or 0.5 kilogram, something like this. So the units of measurement of each variable must be mentioned. The moment you mention the variable, the statistical scale of each variable becomes known, and it must also be mentioned. All these things can be together be mentioned when we enlist the variable and mention these details of the variable in our material and methods. This is an example of list of the variable for our example. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just for example. The variables may be added to this list. The primary variable in our research question is the caloric intake. So it is mentioned first. So the primary variables, that is the variables mentioned in the research question, must be enlisted first. So caloric intake is the first variable. And the source of information is the diet survey. So the caloric intake of an individual included in the study will be determined by a diet survey. This is what our material and methods should say. Then the unit of measurement of the caloric intake will be kilocalories per day. So although the diet survey may be conducted for 7 days a week, but for that individual, it will be the average of the 7 days, and hence it will be mentioned as kilocalories per day. And caloric intake, since it is mentioned in kilocalories, it is a ratio scale. The measurement scale for this variable is a ratio scale. Similarly, the age will be the source of information for age will be the admission records. And from the admission record, we have got the date of birth, and then we will be calculating the age of the person in completed years. So that is the unit of completed years is the unit of measurement of the age, and the statistical scale is the ratio scale. Then gender will be by interview of the person, and it will be the unit of measurement will be the number of persons male and number of persons female, and it is a nominal scale because there are only 2 categories, and they are not having any order. Then the socioeconomic status will also be determined. The source of information will be the interview, and the unit of measurement will be the social class as determined by the interview and methodology of determining the socioeconomic status of the person. So there are 5 social classes, and the person may belong either to social class 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Any one, the person belongs to any one of these social classes, and it is an ordinal scale. Then height, it will be the source of information will be by actual measurement of the height of the individual, and the height will be measured in centimeter, say up to first decimal, and it is a ratio scale. The weight will be by measurement, and it will be in kilograms to the first decimal, and the ratio scale. So like this, we add the variables in the material and methods and mention these details. Now you will see here that the variables will be automatically grouped. For example, the gender and the socioeconomic scale are to be measured by the source of information is the interview. Whereas for height and the weight, the measurement, the source of information is by the measurement. So if you add more variables, we will see that the source of information gets grouped into one or other categories. So some variables will be measured, the source of information will be interview, for some it will be measurement, for some it will be the admission and other records. So we can then segregate these as to which are the variables that will be measured by interview, which are the variables that will be the source of information is measurement, actual measurement, which are the variables that will be verified from the record, and this will help us in preparing the pro forma for recording these variables. Then we collect the data. The collection of the data will be either by questionnaire, interview, information for the record, and the measurement and observations. And we have already classified the interviews, the variables as to which are the variables measured by interview, which are the variables which are to be ascertained from the records, which are the variables are to be ascertained by measurement and observation. They may be either by laboratory or anthropometric measurement or other measurement. So then we prepare the interview schedule, we prepare the information from the record, the schedule of that is prepared. We prepare the schedule for the laboratory. There may be more than one investigations from the laboratory, so we prepare the laboratory schedule, we prepare the anthropometric schedule, and together it forms what is called as the patient information sheet. Together it forms the patient information sheet, and it will have to be prepared. Once we prepare the list, it helps us in preparing the patient information or the participant information sheet. So here we prepare the participant information sheet with which will in addition require the identification data. It could be the admission number of that individual, the institution to which he belongs, something like that. So that will be the identification data. Then there will be some demographic data will be there, like age or gender, which is included in the variables in the study. The variables could be primary or secondary. Each variable will then be coded. The coding is required for the data entry in the computers and analysis. By coding, it becomes easier to enter the data in the computers. We may take help of the IT person or the computer person. The EP Info is a very good software for this. It is freely available on the website, and one can obtain this software and install in our computers. We can prepare then the various schedules that are included in the patient information or the participant information sheet. We also have to prepare what is called as standard operating procedures. Standard operating procedures are nothing but detailed instruction for measurement or recording of a variable. For example, weight is to be recorded. So we give detailed instructions as to how the weight is to be recorded, on what type of machine, whether it will be a spring type of machine or whether it will be electronic type of machine, and to what accuracy the weight will be recorded. Suppose it is a height that is recorded. Then we must mention as to how the height will be recorded, whether it will be with the shoes on or with the shoes off. One must have with the shoes off, because that gives us the correct measurement of the height. So these instructions for each variable must be given. Each variable is to be recorded, and therefore one must give instructions as to how this variable will be recorded or measured, and the details of that will have to be given in the standard operating procedure. Because this is likely to be a multi-centric study, because the caloric intake will be undertaken at the different institutions. The standard operating procedures are more relevant, become more important, because different persons will be getting this information, and in order to have uniformity in obtaining the information on the variables, the standard operating procedures are required. The patient information sheet therefore may contain the questionnaire, the details of the interview, the laboratory form, the measurement, and the information obtained from the records. Then we describe the problem. For describing the problem, we form these subgroups in the population depending on the secondary variables. So there are secondary variables, and we then divide the data of primary variable according to the secondary variables. So we may have person groups, like we may have age-wise groups for caloric intake. We may have gender-wise groups. So what was the caloric intake of males and what was the caloric intake of females? We may have socioeconomic status-wise record separated for the different socioeconomic status, five socioeconomic status, and for each we will find out what was the caloric intake. We may have place groups like the residence-wise, rural or urban. We may have place groups in the form of institution-wise as to what was the caloric intake of the students of this institution and the other institution. We may have, say, 15 or 20 institutions in this study from where the students are selected. So each institution-wise caloric intake may be recorded and analyzed. The time-wise analysis, time-wise description of the variable, primary variable, is not required or is not possible in cross-sectional studies. It will be required or it will be possible only in longitudinal study. So we may then take weekly, monthly, or yearly distribution of the primary variable for time-wise analysis of the data. So describing the data or describing the problem is nothing but describing the distribution of primary variable in various secondary variables. Then we measure the problem. We describe the problem and then we measure the problem. So for that we calculate the mean, standard deviation, etc. for the ratio or interval scale data. For the nominal or ordinal data, we calculate the proportions and percentages, for which we require the number of individuals and the denominator. How many were in that category, and what was the proportion of that variable as per secondary variable. So if the variable is nominal or ordinal, we will be finding out the number and the proportion or the percentage of individuals. In the longitudinal studies, we may calculate the rates for different time units, like incidence rate we may calculate for the different time periods in the study. And we may also, or we will be required to apply the appropriate statistical test. So here is an example how we will formulate the hypothesis depending on the collected data. There are various techniques of hypothesis formation, and these are some of the hypothesis formation techniques. So based on the data which we observe, we formulate the hypothesis. So the first method is the method of agreement, wherein we find the similarities in those affected. Suppose we find in our study that the persons who are having low caloric intake belong to particular group. We may find that only females are having low caloric intake. We may find that the persons from certain socioeconomic class may have low socioeconomic. The persons belonging to certain socioeconomic class may have low caloric intake. So this is the similarity observed over the data that we are observing, that the females are having less caloric intake, the persons belonging to particular socioeconomic class are having low caloric intake, or the persons belonging to a particular institution are having low caloric intake. So this is the similarity, that individuals with low individuals with a particular observation are belonging to a particular category of the secondary variable. Then there is a method of difference, the difference in affected and not affected. So we may try to find out as to who are the individuals having low caloric intake and who are the individuals who are having high caloric intake. And then we compare these two groups. So we may find that as compared to the girls, the boys are having higher caloric intake. We may find that the other institutions are having high caloric intake, but these few institutions are only showing, the students from these institutions are only showing the low caloric intake. The method of analogy may not be applicable over here, but the method of analogy may be there, may be applied in some situations, and I will give you an example. In the early days, when HIV was or the AIDS was a new disease for us, there were only case reports and the case series coming up. This is, I'm talking about the 1980s and 1990s. The only case series and the case reports were coming. And therein one could find that the disease is seen in the commercial sex workers. It is seen in the homosexuals. It is seen in the intravenous drug abusers. So these were the three categories in which the disease was seen. So from this, in our mind, something clicks as to which is the disease which is showing similar distribution, which is the disease in which it is more rampant in commercial sex workers, in intravenous drug abusers, and in homosexuals. And it is the diseases like syphilis and gonorrhea. And these are sexually transmitted diseases. So from the initial reports of the HIV and AIDS, we formulated an hypothesis by way of method of analogy that the transmission of HIV/AIDS could be through sexual route of transmission. And later on it was proved that it is the sexual route of transmission is the predominant route of transmission of AIDS. Of course, the other routes of transmission were also detected later on by the same method of analogy. And the hypothesis, therefore, can be formulated based on method of analogy, wherein we find similarity of the distribution of the problem, which is similar to something which we have seen previously in the published literature. Then there is a method of exception, exceptionally high or low prevalence or incidence, exceptionally high or low caloric intake. Are there any incidences of exceptionally high or low caloric intake in our group, in our study participants? That we can find out. In investigation of an epidemic, we may find out certain areas which are showing no cases at all, whereas some areas may show exceptionally high incidence of the disease. Just as the areas with exceptionally high incidence are important, similarly, the areas with exceptionally low incidence will also give us a clue. For example, in one of the studies published in the international journal, wherein the epidemic of typhoid was described, the prevalence, the incidence of the disease over the period, over the study period was something like 5 to 7%. But they found one locality comprising about 1,000 individuals, wherein no case was reported. That was a very well demarcated area and no case was reported. The hypothesis that these people had formulated earlier was that it was the central contamination of water. The central water purification thing had gone wrong somewhere, and because of which the epidemic occurred. If that was the case, then it didn't explain why this area with 1,000 individuals did not have a single case. If the incidence was around 5%, then at least 50 cases were expected in the population of 1,000, but not a single case was reported in that area. But when the water supply to this population, the information about water supply to this population was seen, it was seen that they were not taking water from the general water supply scheme. They had their own well from which they were taking the water. So this then strengthened the hypothesis that it was the central contamination, because the people, a sizable number of persons who were not taking the water from the central water supply scheme were not affected. So such instances of exception can help us in strengthening our hypothesis. So in our study of Maharashtra University of Health Sciences, we may also try to find as to are there any areas, any groups which are having exceptionally high or low caloric intake. Then we have to report the study. We do not undertake the study to see that the study observations are kept somewhere locked custody. They are for reporting, and we want our study to be published, and therefore reporting is essential. So there are certain widely accepted guidelines for reporting the observational studies, and these are called as strengthening the reporting of observational studies in epidemiology. In short, they are also called as STROBE guidelines, and these are widely accepted, and many journals expect the reporting of the observational study according to the STROBE guidelines. And you can find these guidelines on this URL, and you can go to this website and see the guidelines and download these guidelines for your reference. These guidelines give us the checklist of the things to be reported in a typical observational study. So we have a checklist, and we can then compare our observations and find out whether the checklist items are addressed to in our reporting. Otherwise, our reporting may be deficient. So the checklist ensures a comprehensive reporting so that nothing is left in reporting. And there are flowcharts, which the prototype flowcharts are given, which we can adopt and use in our reporting. So checklist and flowcharts are there in the STROBE guidelines for reporting the observational studies. The first thing that is required in the report of study, the observational study in particular, is the profile of the participants. In fact, in any type of the study, the profile of the participants is to be given in the first table. The first table should have the profile of the participants. So it can be given something in our study of Maharashtra University of Health Sciences. We can give something like this. So how many were males and what is the percentage? How many were females? What is the percentage and the total number of the individuals, males and female? Then socioeconomic status, how many were in socioeconomic status? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and what is the total number? The beauty of this is that this number total over here and this number total over here should be same. Otherwise, if the total over here is 1000 and the total over here is 995, that means in 5 individuals, the socioeconomic status was either not recorded or was not entered in the data sheet, and that's why this thing has occurred. So such types of the errors can occur, and this sort of reporting ensures the complete reporting. Similarly, for age, what was the mean age and what was the standard deviation of the mean of the reported age, that must be reported. So for quantitative data in the ratio scale, we have to report the mean and the standard deviation. For qualitative data with categories, we report the distribution of numbers across the categories. In caloric intake, we may report the mean and the standard deviation, and height and weight also mean and standard deviation. One additional thing which has to be reported, and which has not been shown over here, for the ratio type of data, like wherever the means are given, we must also report the minimum value and the maximum value. So in caloric intake, what was the maximum value of caloric intake reported, and what was the minimum caloric intake reported? In height, what was the minimum height across all individuals, and what was the maximum height? In weight, what was the minimum height and what was the maximum height? So this is for the ratio type of variables. Then analysis of the distribution of the primary variable according to the secondary variable. This of the second part of the paper. So analysis of the primary variable, that is the caloric intake, according to the secondary variables, that is the gender, the age, the residential status, the socioeconomic status. These are the secondary variables. So we will show what was the distribution of the caloric intake per day as per the categories of the secondary variables. For example, in case of gender, what was the number of males? What was the number of females? What was the mean caloric intake in case of males? And what was the mean caloric intake in case of females? What was the minimum caloric intake recorded in males and what was the maximum caloric intake recorded in the males? Similarly, what was the minimum caloric intake recorded in females and what was the maximum caloric intake recorded in females, and the standard deviation. Same thing is repeated for these. So what was the number in age group 1, age group 2 and age group 3? Let us presume that there are 3 age groups. So what was the number in age group? What was the mean? What was the minimum and maximum value? And what was the standard deviation? This is repeated for other secondary variables. Then the result of the statistical test. So appropriate statistical test will have to be, must be applied over here. For example, in this case, we are dealing with the difference in the two means. So we may apply t-tests in this case, or we may apply the test of significance of difference between two means. Here we are considering the difference in the means of the three groups. So here we may apply ANOVA. In this case, the residential status, because there are only two categories, we may apply t-test. And in the socioeconomic status, there are more than two categories, so we may apply ANOVA. So appropriate statistical test as per advice of the statistician must be applied and must be shown in your report. And what are the common issues in the descriptive studies in general and cross-sectional studies in particular? The sample size has to be calculated and it has to be calculated before the study. You cannot say that the difference is now not significant and let us increase the sample size. So that cannot be done. We must take into consideration the considerations that we have discussed for a calculation of the sample size, and it must be calculated by a scientific method. And this method must be mentioned in your report as to how you have calculated the sample size. What were the presumptions? What was the alpha error? What was the beta error? And what was the precision that you had considered while calculating the sample size? Then sampling method must be described in detail in the report. Whatever type of the sampling method you have undertaken, a few details about the sampling method must be mentioned. The bias is a systematic error that is introduced in the study. And in these studies, the selection bias and the measurement bias are most likely to be introduced. Selection bias is introduced in the study when the selected individuals in the sample differ systematically from the individuals not included from the population. So if this thing is likely to occur, then the selection bias has occurred. Measurement bias is when measurement bias is introduced, when the measurement methods adopted for the study are not accurate, then the measurement bias occurs. If the weighing machines are not accurate, if the criteria or the instructions for taking the height are not uniformly followed, then the measurement bias will occur. The validity is the ability of the investigator to show that the results of the study are applicable to the population from which the sample was drawn and to other populations. So if the sample is drawn from the students of Maharashtra University of Health Sciences, then how, because we have undertaken the observations on sample only. So how far the observations in sample reflect the true picture in the population. So that is the internal validity. And the external validity is how far the observations in your study are applicable to the observations in other studies, like the caloric intake of the students in other universities. So that depends on the detailed description of the profile of your study participants. If the study participants in your study and the study and the students of other universities are similar, then your observations may be applicable to other universities also. If that is not the case, then naturally your observations will not be applicable to other case. The internal validity will depend on the sampling method. If your sampling method is scientific and is rigorously and religiously followed, then there is no reason why the applications, why the observations on the sample should not reflect the observations, likely observations on the all university students. There is a feeling in general that the cross-sectional studies are the prerogative of the community medicine only and they cannot be conducted in hospital. No, the descriptive studies can be conducted in the hospital, and these are some of the examples of possible descriptive studies. The research questions which can be addressed through hospital-based studies. What are the top 5 antibiotics prescribed by the pediatricians of your hospital? So the prescriptions of the pediatricians in your hospital form the study population, and the prescriptions by them, individual prescriptions by them, will be the study units. And then you can study the pattern and which are the top 5 antibiotics prescribed by the pediatricians of your hospital. What is the average bed occupancy of different wards of your hospital? So here the patients admitted in the different wards of the hospital, your hospital, form the population, and their bed occupancy is the variable of interest in the study, and that can be studied. And you can limit the study period so that it will reflect the bed occupancy for that period only. Who are the patients that use or do not use the diet provided by your hospital? So the patients of your hospital form the population, and the diet taken by the patient will be the variable. So whether the diet includes the hospital provided diet or it doesn't include are the variations in the variable. What is the socioeconomic and demographic profile of the cases attending antenatal clinic of your hospital? So here the antenatal cases attending the hospital become the participants or participants from which we will undertake the study, and their socioeconomic and the demographic profile are the variables to be studied. What is the incidence rate of low birth weight in babies born in your hospital? So low birth weight is the variable here, and the babies born in the hospital in a specified period will be the study population. What is the incidence of hospital acquired infection in your hospital? So the patients admitted in our hospital in the specified period will be the population, and the acquisition or non-acquisition of hospital acquired infection will be the variable, and it will be having two categories. That is, either hospital acquired infection will be there in the patient or will not be there in the patient. So it will be a two category variable. So you can see here that the descriptive studies can be undertaken in the hospital situation also. So here are a few test questions for you, and we give some time for you to give answer to this question. Cross-sectional studies are indicated for testing the strength of association of two variables, getting estimate of average of variable in the population, testing efficacy of an intervention, and describe the natural history of the disease. So your time starts now. Time stops. And the answer is B. B, that is getting estimate of the average of variable in the population. So for that, cross-sectional study can be undertaken. For strength of association, it will be an association type of question, and the analytical study will be required for that. For testing the efficacy of an intervention, the experimental study, because there is an intervention involved and its efficacy is to be found out. So here again, it will not be this question or this objective will not be fulfilled by a cross-sectional study. For describing the natural history of the disease, we will have to describe the disease in person, place, and time. all the three dimensions of the distribution will have to be described. Of the three, the time distribution cannot be studied in the cross-sectional study. So these three alternatives, that is A, C, and D, are out, and therefore B remains the only alternative for the cross-sectional study. That it can be, cross-sectional studies are indicated for getting estimate of average of variable in population. The second question is, in cross-sectional study, the observations or measurements of variable is or are done at one point of time, at multiple points of time, on two or more groups, and none of the above. Your time starts now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Your time ends. The answer is A. In a cross-sectional study, the observations or the measurement of variable in the research question is done at one point of time only. If it is done multiple points of time, then it becomes a longitudinal study and it doesn't remain a cross-sectional study. In cross-sectional study, we are having only one group. So observations made on two or more groups, it doesn't remain a cross-sectional study. Comparison of two groups is not there in a cross-sectional study. So the only alternative that remains is the A. So in cross-sectional study, the observations or measurements of the variable is or done at one point of time. For finding satisfaction index, if the investigators select the current employees of a factory, ignoring the past employees, the bias that can be introduced is selection bias, classification bias, confounding bias, none of them. Your time starts now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Here is the answer, and you compare your answer with this answer. If you want to find the satisfaction index, that is whether the employee is satisfied with the current employment, then if you select the current employees only, then and ignore the past employees, then there would be a selection bias, because the satisfaction index would be different in the current employees and the past employees. In fact, an employee is likely to become a past employee, that is leave the job wherein we are undertaking the study, because he is not satisfied. So we will, if we include only the current employees, it will be biased in favor of high satisfaction index. A true idea of the satisfaction index will be obtained only if current and past employees are also included in the study. So the selection bias is likely to occur in such cases, and there is no classification bias. But confounding bias, the question doesn't arise. So the correct answer in this question is A, that selection bias will be occurring. The persons included in the study will be systematically differing from those not included, that is past employees. I would advise you to read certain books, get more information on the topic. This is a book, Basics of Research Methodology, written by me, published by Paras Medical Publishers, and this is their address, the Paras Medical Books. That is the address, and you can obtain and purchase online from this source. Then there is the second book also written by me, The Basics of Biostatistics, and it is published by CBS Publishers, and this is the website from where you can place an online order of the book. Thank you. And if you have got any query, you can contact me at this email ID, drapkulkarni@gmail.com. Thank you very much.